Hello, dear listeners, and welcome to the VVA Podcast. My name is Layla Oresme.
And I'm Cristina Tumino.
And today's episode is number 7, entitled Know Thyself.
Yes, know thyself is a quite popular saying that it kind of comes to us from the ancient Greek and Socrates, although we can kind of trace it back even further back in history from ancient Egypt, apparently. But I think it's not just a popular saying, there is a reason why it's so important and so popular. And it's about understanding and knowing who you are. Right?
I think it seems to be a kind of foundational wisdom for any kind of person who seeks to be wise and to lead a meaningful life in a way. Anyone who searches for truth will find this saying very helpful. Basically, we have 2 different kinds of knowledge. So we have the inner knowledge and the outer knowledge. So
this, I actually talk about this in one of my podcasts on the magical parenting, because we have this, what I call the outer knowledge in terms of any knowledge that is related to the to understanding the world and how it works, and how it's important to us to learn how to survive, like animals in some way, that they need to learn how things work in the environment so they know how to learn and grow and survive, as I said before. So anything that has to do with, language, the way you communicate, culture, even like practical things like from science and everything that we learn about the world, and history and geography and all this stuff. But we as well have the inner knowledge, and that is related to something that is deeper within. It's related to our soul. We're all born with this inner knowledge, so we all have a knowledge that is completely different, has nothing to do with the knowledge of how things work in this life, but is a bit more about that kind of wisdom, as you were saying before. It's something very deep inside, and we all have it. And it's like what kind of determines like who we are and our personality, the real personality. And and that is a quite important thing to discover and learn more about yourself and who you are. But
I think it's really important to know that every single person exists in 2 different worlds. So we have the outer world and we have the inner world, and they are both very important because obviously we are existing in those places for a reason. So we can't just forget about one and focus on the other, because it gets rid of that balance that we need as human beings to exist in this world optimally. So that inner knowledge, that inner life is very important, because it helps us deal with things on a mental, emotional, but also spiritual, that kind of soul level, instead of just knowing things and facts about the world that we live in.
Yeah, and I think that's the problem as well with education nowadays, because the normally mainstream education that is imparted in schools, it actually focuses more on just the outer world and the outer knowledge. And that is actually quite bad, I think, because that means there's no room to understand and to develop that inner wisdom that is the one that actually can guide you and give you direction on what you need to do in this life. And in the outer world and all the education that we do in schools is all about understanding, geography, history, and all these kind of things. Is important, it's very important, but it always kind of doesn't consider the other knowledge. So everything is about, everything that you can understand with your mind. And unfortunately, that is quite limiting, because our mind can understand until a certain point, because even our body is a limited body. Everything that has to do with this outer world is quite limited, while the inner world is completely another level. So when we try to understand what we understand just with our minds, like in terms of like science and everything that we try to understand with our mind is quite, again, is quite limited. We cannot really properly understand that concept just with our minds. There is much more than that. And
Yeah,
that's why
right. And I think this is why science is flawed in a way. And I'm not saying that it's not important, because it is important how the world works, because it helps us in creating new inventions that actually help and add to the quality of our life. For example, you know, cars and transport and all these different things. I mean, electricity and all those things, they definitely help, and we do need the knowledge of that, but they don't form a kind of cohesive picture for life. They don't give us guidance on how to live life. They just give us guidance on how do things work so that we can create things and make things. But life is not that simple. We do have that inner life, and we need to be guided by our souls. And in order to do that, we have to go beyond the mind, which is why the science can't actually give us answers to everything. And where many people go wrong is that when science can't confirm something and it can't give us proof, then it means it's not real or it's just made up. But we forget that science can only go to a certain point. And actually, we can go way further with our souls to kind of get that larger understanding that is actually, it can help us create that whole wider perspective of the world we live in. So it can actually aid in more inventions. It can aid in more discoveries, because sometimes you have to go beyond what is rational in order to kind of draw down the things to the kind of the sphere of the mind. So for example, you know, many mathematicians and scientists and physicists, they had to at first conceive something that seemed impossible, and then they worked on proving that with equations and scientific discoveries. So first has to come something that's quite irrational in order for us to, in a way, rise up in that realm.
And I think, because I think we will never really know everything and the truth of everything. It's impossible, because again, we're very limited. So we cannot know the real thing or the real truth or the real meaning. Even Socrates talk about this. Like, actually, a wise person is the one that knows to know nothing, because we will never really know. And science is more like trying to understand, like, you know, like trying to kind of, it's a continuous, ongoing trying to learn and understand and discovering, because the moment you discover something, then you will actually realize maybe 100 years later that you didn't know about these other things.
Exactly. And it completely changes the picture. We see that in science so many times, where people invent theories, and then those theories are considered as facts until another theory comes out, and then kind of, you know, overtakes the preceding one, and then that's the new theory that we see as a fact. But really what these are just theories that are basically proven by scientific experiments. But so there is
point. It's like, you know, when before, years and years ago, we thought that the earth was flat, and everybody thought that. And then somebody working on a deeper level, somebody that was more connected with this inner knowledge, managed to get that kind of clue,
that idea,
and then started to go deeper and understanding and knowing, and then get into actually a completely new awareness that the earth is not flat.
And the same thing happened with Copernicus when he discovered that the Earth revolves around the sun.
Yeah.
Whereas before, everybody thought that it was the sun that revolves around the Earth.
Yeah.
So we get to see that, you know, science can be flawed, and we are nowhere near the kind of optimal highest point in science where we know everything. It's just that we have enough, I guess, technology to prove the theories that we have that to be correct, but that doesn't mean that they are, because maybe there will be, and I'm sure there will be, more theories and more technology, and the whole idea of the universe that we can perceive with our minds is going to continuously evolve. And actually, again, what this means is that no matter how much we know, we will always know nothing. And I've read a very interesting book. I'm actually still reading it, and it is called Is Atheism Dead by Eric Metaxas. And it basically, the first part of the book is about how the discoveries of science basically prove the existence of God, because there are things that science just cannot explain. And when we see how much of a miracle our existence is, there is no way that it can be something that just happens for no reason. Things are so improbable, and there are so many factors that if they were just like the most stupidest fraction different, there would be no life on Earth. And there are, it's not just one or two, there's just so many, and it's so small, the fraction of the difference that it would make to completely then not even be a chance for life to happen. It's just mind-blowing. And what people don't understand is that science confirms this. So
but if you actually consider, like, even just looking at nature, and I think that's a big problem nowadays, because we're getting very more far and far from nature, and children don't even know, like, where does the milk comes from, like, really, like, some, okay, yeah, from the cow, but what does it really mean? Or where olive oil comes, where does it come, the olive oil from, like silly things like that. But the more we get far from nature, the more we actually get distant from this kind of knowledge and from God, because in knowledge you can see there is like a how can I call it, like a divine intelligence in how things work. Like even the things that a tree, some trees let them have, like, they spread their own seeds by, I don't know if you've seen, you know, there's leaves that actually the seed is in there, and then they can fly farther down, so then they can have enough room to then grow another tree. So like every single thing has a specific meaning. Every single animal, every single vegetable, every single plant, everything has a purpose, a meaning, a connection, everything. There's like a proper, like, kind of structure, almost like, as I said, a divine intelligence. And this is quite visible, I believe, like you can see.
I think the fact that there is an intelligent design in the world we live in is obvious. And again, science confirms this. And one thing that science just cannot seem to figure out, and probably never will be, is the simple idea of how did life come into existence. So it's not even about the universe and the Big Bang, but that's another story. Where did the Big Bang originally come from? It couldn't just come from nothing, but yet it did, right? And another thing is, you know, how did, you know, amino acids turn into a living life? And this is what science cannot grasp. And they say, oh, well, evolution. But wait, you're talking about what happened after life started, because that's what evolution is. It's the process after life began. How did life begin? And no scientist ever can tell you how, because we just don't know.
No, and I think I don't know if we will ever know in this earth, because it's a continuous learn. I think the purpose is not to understanding where we come from, but it's understanding where we what do we need to do in this life. What like it's about learning and growing. That's not the most important thing. And on a personal level, I think the same thing is with medicine. Like medicine, yeah, we have progressed. Like the average life of a person now is like, I think 75 years as an average in the world. Compared to many years ago, there wasn't even 40. So like it's a big gap. Like we have done lots of discovery. We learned a lot more about our bodies and all this stuff. But I think the key when we say about know thyself is about, because the fact that we are all unique, the more we actually understand how we work, me, Christina, you, Layla, as a person, our body, because it works differently. Although we're all made of bones and muscles and everything, we work differently. So the more we know and understand and learn how to listen on an individual level to our body, what it's telling us, how it's supporting us, the more we can actually support science and medicine in a proper kind of evolutionary way, because it's not just about learning new things but then being treated all in the same way. Then doesn't really help us to really grow. And so those tools that help us to learn more about the body in reality can be good, but until a certain extent, because we need to really understand how we work on a personal level, I think. So again, we are there in know thyself, and nobody really knows the truth and everything, because everything has many kind of phases or aspects or areas that we will never really know deeply. And that's why I think it's important. The more we connect with that inner knowledge, the more we learn how to move in this outer world.
And we will actually find it so much more magical and so much fascinating. I don't actually see the conflict between the outer knowledge and the inner knowledge, because they complement each other in such a beautiful way. I really do not see the conflict, but many people are stuck in this way that it's either this or that. And it's, you know, we live in a very dual world. So it's the kind of like, you know, where we have spoken about in previous episodes about the male and female dynamics, you know, they're completely different, but they harmonize, they work together in harmony. And this is what makes it beautiful. And it's the same thing with the inner and outer knowledge, because what we will find out is that by knowing ourselves, we can understand the world better. We can understand, and we can see the meaning of those things in a much better way. So,
and I think another thing that you actually, I think you did mention this in one of your articles, and I think it's very important to highlight this, that inner knowledge and gaining that kind of direction in life has nothing to do with following your heart. Maybe you want to say something about this. It just, you know, when you were talking about in an article about following your heart and rather than following your soul, I think this is really important.
Yeah, exactly. So I think the self-knowledge, when we actually go into it, we will find out that there is a lot more to us than just following our whims. And I think this is where a lot of rational thinkers, a lot of rational people are kind of put off by that idea of, like, you know, following your kind of inner calling, because they don't realize that there is actually a difference between following your inner whims and your emotions, which is what people usually call a heart. So they kind of like follow your heart, go with the flow. But then there is something else, which is you're following your soul. And what you will find is that following your soul is not always easy. It's actually quite hard sometimes, because when you listen to your soul, it will tell you to do things that are uncomfortable, that put you out of your comfort zone, that make you go beyond what you think you can already do. Whereas following your heart is basically following what feels good, and that can be very destructive. They kind of, you know, go with the flow. Well, you know what goes with the flow? It's dead fish that go with the flow. You know, real like fish, living fish like salmon, you know, they go against the current of the river. It's the dead fish that go with the flow. So we don't want to be that. We don't want to be that. We want to push ourselves to be better people, not just to kind of follow the emotions and do what feels nice and comfortable and warm and fuzzy, because that's not where growth is.
No, and I think as well, because emotions, because they belong of the body, mind, feelings, and emotions is part of this outer world. In terms, we need it to experience life. But the problem is if they lead, like for instance, like because they're more like an impulse. So if when they lead like fear or I don't know, anger, or when they take the lead, is actually they leading, not our soul. So if we go and follow our heart in terms of our emotion, maybe our emotion is telling us like that because we are maybe fearful of something, we are actually taking that direction because it's the emotion that is leading. So in reality, we're not doing what is good for us, really deeply what we really need, but we're doing what the emotion is leading us to do. That is like putting kind of blindfolds or something in front of us, rather than the soul, where the soul can say, 1 second, hold on, you're actually acting in this way because you are scared of this. So if you are scared of this, you're not seeing properly, and you're not seeing reality as it is. So instead of going to the right direction, you're going the opposite direction. So that's why it's important to, I think, not follow your emotions, your heart, your body, and your mind simply by what you think, I mean, for your understanding of your mind, but following that bigger and wisdom that comes from something that is like the soul.
And I talk about that in my other video about the body, mind, feelings, and how it's basically what you say. So the body, mind, feelings is the kind of the source of all of our survival instincts and the kind of primitive desires and things like that. And what the body, mind, feelings seeks to do is to preserve. So it protects you. It wants to stay the same because it wants to keep you safe. But what the soul wants is to grow and to learn. So that involves, going into a bit of a danger zone. And sometimes, and this is what happens often, is the body, mind, feelings kind of like stops the soul from going there because it's like, no, it's not safe. But we have to go into that realm in order to grow and to go beyond that and actually know more about ourselves. Because if we are always stationary and we are always in that same kind of mindset where it's comfortable, we will not learn. We won't know anything about ourselves. So
and we need both. We need these body, mind, feelings to experience life and do everything we need to do here in this practical kind of tangible world. And we need the other one to guide. So we need both. But as you were saying, it's like the body, mind, feelings is kind of it's like as the yin and yang, that you need the night and you need the day, women and men, and all these kind of dualities, kind of in that way, although it's not really, but gives the idea. And the body, mind, feeling is like kind of a heavier, I don't know, I see it in that way. It's like a heavier kind of I don't know if it's a force, but it's a bit heavier compared to the soul. And
it's actually comprised of matter, right? Because our bones, our muscles, and all these things. And then we have, emotions, which are a little less dense, but they have some kind of weight. And then emotions, but what the soul is kind of like light, which doesn't really have weight. So even though we might think, well, thoughts, they don't weigh anything, but they are comprised of something.
They have volume. They have like a volume, like air. Like they have like a volume, and they take space, like air, like gas, like these kind.
And another good analogy that might help people think of the body, mind, feelings is to see it as a kind of bad dog that needs to be trained. So most people will have seen dogs that haven't been trained, and they're just so incredibly annoying, and they bark, they
fearful.
exactly. And it's a hassle more than anything. But then when you have a dog that is trained, it can actually help to protect you and to, guard you, and you can actually use him, and he can actually be a very good friend. So this is what the body mind feelings is. So then we might think, okay, so how do we train this dog? So we have to think of all the 3 levels that it kind of operates on. So we have the physical body, which is like I said, the muscles, the skeleton. So we can help that through our diet and working out, strength training, and just generally keeping our body healthy, not eating processed foods, giving it enough proteins and fats and all the nutrition that it needs.
And learning to understand yourself. When we were talking about know thyself. So this is an aspect of doing that, becoming aware of the body, mind, feelings, and the soul. So the more you become aware of your physical body, as you were saying, and the emotional body, and the mental body, the more we become aware of this, and our soul, understanding what makes us curious about something, the more we understand ourselves. And in some way, I would relate, and I don't know if that is something that can be like, when we're talking about the importance of how do you know yourself, how do you start to know yourself. So that's one aspect, understanding about these areas of development, of growth, that you mentioned as well in one of your podcasts. But as well, one thing that helped me like greatly, immensely, was actually numerology. Because with numerology, you can understand on what kind of energy we vibrate, and with this positive and negative. So we understand more about, we can start, of course, although we're all unique and we all work in different ways, but those are like kind of main kind of guidance to understand and to give us ideas of how we can, it's a tool to understand more, for us to understand more how we operate, like what our potentials and what our negative sides in some way.
And the kind of different attributes that we can have and that can potentially help us in life, or on the other hand, it can, the negatives can actually bring us down and stop us from getting to where we want to get. So by becoming aware of these things, we can actually make them work for us rather than the other way around, and control them. I think this is the key. So going back to, even the body, mind, feelings, I think it's, really important to learn about the body and the emotions and the mind and how these things work. And it's that kind of curiosity that's such a great and powerful force, because it makes us understand things. And then when we go onto a deeper, more kind of metaphysical level with numerology, we can find out about, the traits of our character and what tendencies we have. And then again, we can learn and develop a kind of self-discipline, because self-discipline is impossible without knowing things. For example, I'll give an example of myself. Every time I wanted to break a habit, whether it was drinking alcohol or smoking or anything like that, it helped me to know precisely why that was bad for me and how it was affecting my health, for me to actually fully stop. Because if I was ignorant of that and I didn't know how it was affecting me, I wouldn't have that kind of clear vision on this is wrong and I shouldn't make space for this in my life. So it's the same with our character traits. If we know we have them and how they are affecting our life, then we can say, you know what, I'm done with this. And I'm going to do everything in my power to control that behavior and not allow it to wreak havoc in my life.
So one thing is important, to become aware. So the earlier you become aware, when you start to become aware, you can start to work on it. Although there is many people that are kind of aware, There are a few things you need to, like, for instance, silly things like you need to exercise. Yeah, perfect. I know I have to exercise, is good. Then maybe we find all the possible excuses in the world to don't do it. And that's part of this dark side that pull us down and don't allow us to grow. And then what we need to do is actually put in action a plan. For me, discipline is putting in action a plan that you have to write it down, or it needs to be something like practical and realistic, and not too like, like something impossible. Like you will achieve it, but you have to do little steps. So in terms of exercising, as a practical example, me personally, I like to write it down and have it visually. So if I put like on a calendar and I write, okay, I'm aiming to do 3 days a week to start with, and I'm starting with, I don't know, 15 minutes just to start. Don't do something too heavy, I don't know. So you start with 15, 20 minutes. And if I put it on a calendar and visually I see it, that means I'm doing a kind of contract, an agreement with myself that I have to go and train those 3 days a week, and I have in my calendar, and it's like my contract with myself. I need to do this. I need to go and do that. So if I visually see it and I start with 20 minutes, whatever, a day, then I can start to maybe go a bit beyond and do maybe 30 minutes every day, or add one extra day and plan it. I will do it at this time. Like if I'm going to work, I'm doing it at this time every time that I'm going to do, like, I don't know, Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays, or something like that, and put it like visually, because the more you make it real and write it down and visible, the more you have your plan. I know that we are not working that way because there's people that work differently, but that can help that kind of dark side, that resistance to allow you to achieve things, because only with discipline you can achieve goals. If you don't, like when I was writing my book, I had to put down a calendar so I could see the days that I was going to work on that, and make sure that every single day I put there, like, I don't know, like 4 days a week, I was going to sit down for that hour at that time, whether I want it or not. I was there. I showed up to write, and it always worked. And I managed. There were a few days that I was a bit less productive, and days that were a bit more. But it's the little steps that helped me to manage to achieve that goal. And then that means that you are in control. Discipline is being in control of these things that push you down. I was talking about resistance. I know the book, The War of Art. I know that you read that book. Actually, I think you read it even before me, by Steve Pressfield. Where he talks about, I know that he talks about art in terms of like writing or anything that has to do with creativity in that sense, but is related to the dark side in general anyway, with any aspect.
He calls it resistance.
Yeah, he calls it resistance. And actually, I wanted to write, if it's okay, read one of the passages when he just saying that resistance, in other words, is anything that kind of pulls you down. So he says resistance will will tell you anything to keep you from doing your work. It will perjure, sorry, I'm not good at reading this, fabricate, falsify, seduce, bully. Resistance will do everything. It's that kind of evil thing, when you have the angel and the thing like in the cartoons, and the thing is the one is going to tell you like, what's the point? Like we say, the devil is in the detail.
Yeah,
it doesn't matter, don't do it.
Like you're not good enough anyway, so why bother? Or it's never going to happen, or it's not that important.
Yeah,
lie to you. It's a kind of realm of delusion, and it's really powerful. But what we have to remember is, light is always more powerful than darkness, because what darkness actually is the lack of light, So what will help us as well when we set certain goals is to determine the kind of motivating factor. So let's say we want to, I don't know, lose weight. So instead of saying, well, I don't want to get fat, or I don't want to get sick, which is why I can't have those things. We think, I want to be healthy. I want to be strong and lean, which is why I'm going to eat those healthy things. And the energy of that is so much more inspiring than the kind of like, I can't do this because it's bad for me. And do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Or even like say,
high ideal, which is like inspiring, and you know it's good, you will be more drawn towards that than the opposite of that.
Mm. And
So
the opposite is very clever. Because it's very like, and it's, of course it's deceitful, but it's very clever and subtle. So it will come to you and say, oh, well, it's okay if you eat just a little bit of chocolate. What's going to do? It's just a tiny bit. And that is where is the problem, because as soon as a little bit of that dark side comes in, you open the door, boom, the rest will come out soon, will come in soon. So it's just becoming aware, and numerology can really help you to understand what are your kind of negative traits and positive potential traits, and positive and negative potential traits. But that will help you to kind of become aware and see, oh, is that what I like? I tendency, like when I'm not really into myself or aligned, or there is something wrong, and I'm not happy with something, we tend to go into the negative side. And that's when we know more about us, that can help us to then keep it under control, to become aware, first of all, because if we're not aware of something, there is no point. You can stay there. Somebody, even God can come down and tell you there's no way. If you don't see it, nothing can change your mind. But the more you become aware, the more you can then start to work on it. And I think it's hard work. And you need lots of courage. Well,
this is the whole point. It's the hard work that makes us evolve. And for anyone that has never heard of numerology and wants like a quick little startup, I have actually done a video where you can really easily figure out your life path number, and I give you like keywords to get you started on your positives and negatives.
Yeah, you put both. Yeah. So what do you think then is the end, like the real goal, what do we gain from all this hard work and knowing ourselves? What was the goal of all this?
I think the most important thing is that we gain a different perspective on life, and we stop being victims. We start taking responsibility for our life, and that gives us so much power. It makes us it makes us feel that we are in control, no matter the bad things that go on. When we can take accountability for those things, we are in a power position. So it kind of diminishes the poor me kind of mentality of, why is this going on for me? Why is life so bad? Well, it is bad because you're not doing anything about it. So I think it just, when we know ourselves, we know why things are the way they are, and it brings us the kind of peace, even in the really tough times and situations. We can have that peace of mind because we know ourselves, we know how we got there, and we know how we're going to get out. Or maybe we don't even know yet, but we know the tools that will help us in figuring out what to do next. And that is so freeing. You know, I think the more, and that's the kind of paradox of discipline, is that the more discipline we put on ourselves, the more free we become as a result, because we are not slaves of the body, mind, feelings, and our emotions and our urges, but instead we are leading with our soul. And that kind of,
we become loyal. It's like we become loyal, like loyal workers, light workers in some way. It's like we become loyal, because the more we connect with ourselves and our soul, the more we actually connect with God. And if we become loyal to our souls, and we work with, not against, but with, the more we can fulfill our purpose, or whatever we came to do in this life. And
And I wrote an article about this. It was called The Joy of Knowledge. And it was about how, I think Ibn Arabi said this, that all knowledge is essentially knowledge of God. So it is the kind of human drive to seek truth and to seek to know, because it's the kind of, it's at the core of the human condition to discover and to know. And I think this is what makes humans so special, because it's, in a way, we can come to know God through our search for knowledge. And it can be even in, for example, things like science, because we are figuring out we are learning about the creation that God created, which makes us know more about God as a result. And the same is for us. We are creatures of God. So the more we know about ourselves, the more we become aware of God. I mean, obviously, we will never know totality, but we get those experiences of these glimpses.
And I think we will be even more humble, because the point is not, when we work in that way, we know that we don't have, how can I say, we're not powerful, we're not, we, like, God is the power, kind of.
And like, we are just human, you know?
We're just humans, and we're here, and we accept that we are limited individuals in this life, in this world, and we have to kind of do the will of God in this world, if it makes sense.
I think humility is incredibly important, and I think that state of humility of, I am just a human, I make mistakes, I have a dark side to myself, and just accepting that and being in that state of humility can actually help us channel a lot more than the kind of pride and I know everything, where unfortunately a lot of scientists are. You know, scientists kind of, well, a lot of them, it has become a sort of a cult where they think they are gods because they know how things work, but yet they don't know how to create life out of nothing. And you'll never know. So,
and I think that's not evolution or progression of things, because if you don't consider God and the fact that you are not God and you don't know everything and you need to be humble, you're really not going forward. I think you actually go backwards until then they get a point where you need to start to connect necessarily, and then with God and yourself, and then you can start to go forward, because it's inevitable. You cannot do that. You need to be, and it's because it's strange, because I think when you become humble enough to understand, and it's something that you work on always, all your life. It's not like you all of a sudden become humble and you just do everything. It's something that you work on, and then always there's something more to learn. There is always the dark side that will do something you need to control, always, always, always. But the more you can connect more with that light and that power, and you're still powerful. It's not that you are not, you're still powerful, but in the way that you're supposed to be powerful, not in the way that recognizing that God is God, but you're still powerful.
It's a constant kind of battle. It's almost like this constant dance of, you know, humility and pride, because every time we find out something new, we get excited, and we get to this point where, you know, we want to celebrate what we know, but then it's a fine point where we can tip over to this pride of I know better than others. And then what will usually happen is that some event will occur in our life to make us humble again, and that happens every single time. So it's like a constant,
but because that's the point of the whole thing, is coming to learn. We come here to learn, to experience and learn and grow. So there will always be this dance, I think, because that's the way to learn. Because if something becomes stable, like static, and doesn't move, how can it be growth? How can it be change? How can you learn? So it has to be this constant thing. That's why we will never stop learning about our dark sides, how to control, and because something new will come, we will become good at this, and then again something else come on the other side, and the more the light, the more the shadow. So the more we need to learn how to control it. So it's a continuous kind of thing. But I think that's why it's so important, because the more you know yourself, the more you learn for the truth. It's like, the concept of philosophy as seen in the ancient Greeks, where philosophy, when you philosophize, you actually, what you do is trying to go in and you are searching for truth. You're searching for the truth in a humble way. You are trying to understand and learn and become more wiser and learn about wisdom. And
Wow.
I think that is what is about knowing yourself, knowing about you, and learning about what makes you who you are, and why, and what can you do, how can you contribute, what do you need to learn, what are your lessons to learn, and so on.
And the word philosophy actually means the love of wisdom, philosophia. So it comes from Greek, and that's what it means. And well, you might say, well, what is wisdom? What does it mean to love wisdom? And the way I see wisdom is that it's the laws of God, the main lessons that are present all throughout the ages, and they are always applicable to human existence, because they come from beyond our realm. They come from beyond the mind and beyond the emotions. They literally come from God. So philosophy in a way is love for the truth, which in a way is God.
And for the light as well, like
Exactly.
for the truth, for the light, for God. So yes, we talk about lots of like deep stuff here. So what maybe we can conclude by bringing down the blindfolds, as we used to do. And so what can be the fact that when we don't know ourselves as a negative thing, I can say that it can lead to allowing the dark side within and the body mind feelings to lead, and that actually doesn't help us to grow and to act in a responsible way, to own that responsibility to lead our lives in the ways we're supposed to, and maybe not blaming others, and maybe seeing reality for what it is. So when we don't work on ourselves, it actually leads to lots of not really good things. We actually get lost, and that's why is important. But and that's why we need to work on self-discipline and self-control. And the positive sides of knowing yourself, maybe you can give a little summary.
Well, again, I would say it's the kind of peace and the just knowing where you are going, and it's that wisdom that actually guides us, and just knowing how you work so that you can control yourself, and that you can to a degree control the outcomes of your life, because we can't always control everything, but we can influence it to a very high degree. So also just making your life a lot better as a result of this. And it's just such a foundational thing that without it, like you say, everything crumbles. So when we can focus on self-knowledge and just the kind of general spirit of curiosity, which is so foundational to like human experience, it makes the whole world magical. When we realize how much there is to know and how little we know, and how mysterious and just incredible the world is, and we are, and everything inside this reality, whether outer or inner, and having that balance of the two knowledges, of the two different kinds, the inner and outer worlds, it can completely transform our life.
And of course, I think it's important to just add, it doesn't mean that knowing yourself and all these beautiful things and magic. It doesn't mean that it doesn't have suffering, or it doesn't have hard work and all this stuff. Actually, this is a big component that is part of it, but it's because it's necessary for us in order to.
And I think what self-knowledge gives is the acceptance of those things,
and tolerance,
and being at peace with things not being perfect all the time, with there being suffering, and having to go outside of our comfort zones in order to learn. All of this is necessary, but when we are at peace with it and we are not at war with what we have to do, and that's inevitable, then we have so much more fulfillment in our life.
And another thing I think as well, it gives us direction. And when you get direction in life, I think is so powerful. It's like you see your path, things happen in the way, but you still have your direction. And I think that knowing is very powerful. Yeah, perfect.
Okay, so thank you so much for listening or watching, whatever you're doing. Please share, comment, like if you can. Yeah. And we will see you in the next episode.
Yes. Bye.